Hey guys, in this video I'm going to show you how to replace the bushings in your A-arms. There's a front bushing and a rear bushing. I remove the carrier on this side to show you what happens to these bushings over time. They become really out of round and tired, and what that does is it causes the torsion bars inside to rub metal on metal, which is not a good thing. It can lead to failure, aside from a really poor ride. So we're going to fix this with new bushings from 914 rubber. These are really tight and they're going to restore an OEM ride, but the install is a little challenging, so follow along carefully, and I know you can do this install and you'll have a great ride. Okay, here's most of everything you're going to need to do this install. Of course, first the bushing kit from 914 rubber, which comes with their installation tool and the pilot tool. An angle level, this is just bubble tight, but you can use your iPhone even if you're careful. A boiling pot of hot water, oven mitt, lots and lots of soft soap. A thermometer is helpful, but not necessary. A length of threaded rod with two flat, heavy washers that are at least as wide as the installation tool. 3 nuts. You're going to need some electrical tape, which we'll explain in a little bit. And you'll need 2 wrenches for the nuts so that you can jam them tight. A vice grip and a vise. So let's get started. We're going to do the front bushing install first. This one's easier because it has this tapered end. We're going to need to put this bushing into this front carrier, and notice that the carrier has 2 sides. This is the bottom and this is the top with the washer type things on top. And to make sure the bushing sits properly in the carrier, we're going to soften it up with some boiling water along with the carrier just for a couple minutes to get it warm. Now let's fish the carrier out, put it on the bench. It's very hot. And here's our bushing. Now we're going to put some soap all over it. Remember, it's hot, so be careful. Woo. If you're not holding a camera, you can do this with 2 hands. Now I'm just going to do a quick run of soap in the inside of here. And now, because it's warm, it should really push right in. No force whatsoever. Yep, hardly any force. And it's seated properly. If you try to push it in cold, which some carriers will accept, and you get any resistance at all, stop and heat it up. Because what's happening is the bushing is stretching as you press harder on it, and when you put it onto the actual A-arm, it's going to separate from the carrier, from the lip. So that's looking good. Now we have to go and boil it again. Alright, so we've got a pot of water on the stove and we're going to boil this up. You need enough water in there to completely cover the bushing and carrier, and a little bit more so that it retains the heat better. While the water's boiling, I'm going to put my A-arm into a vise. And what's really helpful is a vise that kind of hangs close to the workbench, because you're going to want to use the side of the workbench in your favor as you're doing this installation. Okay, before we go and cook the bushing and carrier combo, I just want to show you what's going on here. So we're going to put this over here, and then you can actually get it to stay kind of. And then we're going to put the install tool in here like this. And then we're going to have the washer and the 2 nuts go on that end. Of course, we'll make sure the threaded rod is long enough to accommodate that. And then what's going to happen is, as you tighten the nut on this end, it's going to pull this whole assembly back that way until the edge of this bushing hits the edge of the A-arm stop. And that's what we're going to do. Now, the reason why we need to heat this up so much is there's a 5 millimeter difference between the inside diameter of this and the outside diameter of this. 5 millimeters, it's a lot. So in order to get the rubber to squish enough to actually fit onto the A-arm, it needs to be very, very hot, above 170 degrees. So when you're boiling it, it'll be 212. As soon as you pull it off the stove, it will start to drop temperature very quickly. So you have about 5 minutes after you pull it off the stove to complete the install and get it onto the A-arm. If for some reason you get delayed, definitely just go and put it back on the stove and reheat it up, because you don't want it to cool down in the middle of this process. If you do, it will go on unevenly, or maybe even the bushing will rip. So it's a bit of a challenging install, but the plus side of it is that this bushing will be really tight. It's going to be almost a performance bushing for a street or stock price. So that's a pretty good deal. So if you just play by the rules and get the install going properly, you're going to have a really, really tight ride, which is worth the hassle, I think. Okay, the water is boiling, and now it's time to make bushing and carrier soup. So what we're going to do is put the metal end down, not the rubber end, metal end down, because you don't want the bushing directly on the heat. Now let's set a timer for 10 minutes and let it cook. Okay, so you can see that the threaded rod is sitting at the bottom of the hole against the splines, and to get the maximum pulling force we want it to be more centered. So what I did is I took an old piece of fuel hose and slid it, and I'm going to now kind of cover it, which is going to make the rod sit higher. You can also use some electrical tape to bring it even higher, but I think that's probably going to be enough for the purposes of this install. It's helpful if you lubricate the end where you're doing the tightening so that the nut slides a little easier. I've got 2 wrenches so that I can do a jam nut. I've got my 2 jam nuts and the washer, which will go on as soon as the bushing happens. And then lots and lots of soft soap. This is just regular hand soap. Pink grapefruit scent. So pick your smell, because you're going to be smelling it a lot. There's going to be a lot out here. So it's really important that you get everything ready to go. All right, it's been boiling for 10 minutes. And it looks like it's as close to boiling as it's going to get. 206 degrees. Now we have to move quickly to get this onto the arm. I'm going to turn off the burner here, and we'll start the timer for 5 minutes. All right, the clock is ticking. We're going to get it out here and start by getting a lot of the soap all over it. Get nice soap all around it. Soap all around this. Lots of soap. Can't have too much. Okay, so we've got this all lubed up, and now it's time to put this on the arm. Now bushing towards the back, and you want the nuts or the washer looking things on the top. And it helps to tilt it a little away from the ball joint, because that's the direction it's going to go in. Okay, so now it's on there. We're going to put our tool, don't forget that, and then the washer. And now we're going to go with 2 nuts. And yes, I'm moving fast because I have to with this heat. So we'll get it nice and centered. And now a jam nut, which is going to come on. Jam nut's super important, because if you don't have the jam nut, the rod will spin and you're not going to pull this thing onto the arm. Okay, so now here's where we have our 2 wrenches, and we're going to go in opposition to make sure that they're nice and tight. All right, and now a vice grip. Should have prepped that before. We're going to get a vice grip that will just grip the outer nut, and as I turn, it's going to hit the bench here and act as a stop. So now we'll begin tightening, and you'll see the bearing, moving onto the arm. Just keep turning. Try to do it as smoothly as you can without stopping. Again, we're trying to take advantage of that heat. Nothing wrong with a little bit more soap while you're doing it. You could secure this a little bit better in the vise. We just keep going. It will get harder as we move towards the end of it. You can see the distance closing. The gap is closing. And we want to get it so that it hits the mark, it hits home, and then half a turn more, and that's it. Now what we have to do is index that bushing. This front bushing needs to be 21 degrees. So I'm going to set the bubble level here for 21. We need to make sure that the arm is level. And then we come over to the carrier and see that it's just a little bit shy of 21 degrees, so we have to pull it back a little more this way. And we can see that we're at level there, 21 degrees. It tilts away from the ball joint. So this one's set. Now it creeped a little bit away from the flange while I was doing this, so we'll just use a vice grip to pull it back in a little bit while it dries, and that should hopefully hold things nice and tight. The rear end is harder because there's no taper on it, and that's what this pilot tool is for. So the pilot tool goes in here like this, and then the carrier and the bushing, and then the tool, and then the washer and the nuts. So it requires a lot of force to get up and over this edge. And what's important is that this edge is absolutely lined up. You don't want something like that where it's going to be even harder for it to get over that side and create a lip on this side where it could possibly rip. So we're going to do two things. The first thing we're going to do is try to get this rod centered in the tool. And the way we're going to do that is with some electrical tape. So what we're going to do is we're going to wrap some tape around here to get the rod wider. Now, of course, if you're using rod that's wider, you won't need this. But with this M12 rod that I'm using here, I do need it. I'm guessing probably around that much. Now we'll see. Yep, just about right. Just holds it like that. Right, so it's now in the center of the tool. So now what we have to do is wrap electrical tape around this to make sure that it gets centered in the splines here. Otherwise, you can see it moves around. So, just like a cooking show, I have one that's pre-done. So I've wrapped some electrical tape in here, and you can see it's a nice snug fit, and the rod fits right in the middle of it. And we are in good shape. And now we're going to let the rear bushing boil for 10 minutes. Okay, so we've got everything set. Everything is really ready to go. I've even got the vice grip at just the right size for the nut. Let's let's put the mid on, and let's get this bearing out of the hot water. Okay, and we'll get plenty of soap on this, and we'll soap this up as well. Lots and lots and lots of soap. Okay, and now what we're going to do is, see this loop here has a tapered end and a wide end. The wide end needs to be up, face up. This is the up side of the A-arm. So what I'm going to do is just assemble the order here and get it to a hand tighten spot before we start to do the tightening, because I want to make sure everything is lined up. The pilot hole, everything needs to be lined up, and you got to work fast again. And also it helps to tilt the loop away from the ball joint, because that's the direction it's going to go in. You'll have less of a hassle indexing if you do it that way. Okay, so everything's kind of like finger tight, and that's still very hot, as you can see. And I'm looking at this thing right here, if we can go in close. And the pilot tool is a perfect transition. So we've got lots of lube. And now we're going to jam nut it. And vice grip just the outside nut. And now begin tightening. So just watch over there. Once again, the hotter it is, the easier it goes on. So I'm going to work a little bit faster here because it took me a little extra time to get everything lined up. This side will have a little bit more force, go on a little harder, because it's got to come up and over that pilot bushing. You can see the gap is getting closer. I know that it's pretty much over the pilot right now. So the hard part's done. Definitely have to have your Wheaties when you're doing this. And we're almost there. Just about to hit home. And it's now at home. And we're going to go 1/2 turn more. And we're in. So we loosen this up. Pull out the installation tool now. Good. So let's flip this around in the vise and index it now. You want to get this to 14 degrees. So right now it's too tilted. It's got to come back up this way. For some reason, the back bushing requires more force to index it. I'm just going to use a helper pipe to kind of help things along. Okay. Let's see what we got here. Once again, and that's it, 14 degrees. Now if you find that this is separating at all, you can put vice grips on here and just leave it that way overnight until the soap dries. And there you have it. A little bit of time in the kitchen and a little bit of time in the garage. It's perfect, my two favorite things. So as you can see, there are a lot of steps to this install, and on a scale from 1 to 10, this is probably a solid 9, just because there are a lot of things that have to happen right for it to be done correctly. In the process of me doing this, I trashed a few bearings, ripped them, or got stuck because they cooled in the middle. So I strongly suggest that you order an additional set of bushings to have on hand just in case. Mark and the boys from 914 Rubber have told me that they will accept prorated returns. So even if you only use one bushing from the second kit, they'll take the other 3 back. And they're easy to mail because they're super light. So go ahead, don't be afraid. Do this install. It's fun and it'll restore your ride to OEM condition. And that's what this is all about. Having fun with the 914. Enjoy.